All right, here for another edition of the Field of 68 Mid-Major Show. I am Sean Paul, joined by my co-host Rocco Miller. After a very eventful finish to Feast Week, a very eventful finish to Thanksgiving, Rocco fresh back in the States from Canada at the Western Slam. Rocco, how you doing?
I'm good, Sean. I finally got a little sleep last night. We had a wild Saturday night with the last two games, both ending 67-60 somehow. We had a lot of stoppages and reviews
Mm.
on that night. Langston Richfield, sadly, probably tore his ACL for UC Irvine. Getting official word on that probably today. But other than that, it was awesome week for the Anteaters. Our drive back to Calgary from the Western Slam took till about 1:30 in the morning. But luckily I had an afternoon flight. So I'm all good. I'm ready for another big week. We've got league play starting this week in some leagues, Sean, and
Mm.
there's so much to look forward to. Welcome to December.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's no better way to kind of get into the new month, get into the actual meat of college basketball because college football is almost over. So now it's time to just redo some rankings a little bit. Rocco does them every week, but I think it's good that we have a couple weeks of data on our hands to kind of look at things. So we're going to rank our top mid-major teams here, beginning in segments of five, like we did last time. So we're going to go 25 to 21 and so on. So Rocco, why don't you kick it off with 25 to 20?
All right, let's have some fun with this. So yeah, barely hanging on in the poll, and honestly, a lot of this is just about my long-term projections of this roster, but really haven't earned a lot on the court quite yet. Is the Arkansas State Red Wolves? They just came back from the Gulf Coast Showcase with a little bit of a disappointing 1-2 showing, struggling in a lot of tight games, and even earlier, couldn't pull away from Stephen F. Austin at home. They did have a nice showing early in the season at Alabama to stay within 9. So that the ceiling on this team is high, but I'm going to keep them in there at 25. We'll see what they do. They have a big game at Memphis on Sunday. At
Mm-hmm.
24 is the Belmont Bruins. We'll talk a little bit more about them on the weekend preview as they have a showdown coming up with Middle Tennessee. At 23, I have a very interesting team, Sean, the UT Rio Grande
Okay.
Valley
I don't have them in.
Vaqueros.
So that's a good one. I'm glad you got them in there.
and listen, it's hard to give teams credit for losses, but they're
Mm.
basically in there for that. Obviously, making Creighton sweat early in the season, making Wisconsin go to the wire, almost beating them, in fact. And so their three Division One wins are not anything to write home about. Charleston Southern, Tennessee Tech, and Lemoyne.
Hold up.
Um,
Charleston Southern, I mean, they haven't been good this year, but like I know
they beat
Miami's
Miami.
really bad, but they did beat an ACC school. So
They,
that's not
they
nothing, I would say.
Absolutely, and Charleston Southern, we'll probably be talking about them again this year. They were down three starters most of the first 2 weeks, so I
Yeah.
know in that Miami upset, a key component came back, and so
If
the
Sumler's back, they're going to be a problem. I don't know what his injury status is. He's been out all year, but if he's back, that's going to be big for them.
no doubt. So the Vaqueros, just based on performance alone, I mean, they're a top 100 performing team per all of our favorite analytics, particularly Torvik in this example. And the 22 hole is UC Santa Barbara, just a team loaded with talent, still waiting for them to get a major win, but they did come
Hmm.
up to San Jose State and win a game that we didn't think was a big deal back on the November 17th. But right after that, San Jose came to Vegas and won a pretty good Ball Dogs Classic. San Jose
Hmm.
State winning that 3-0. Obviously, we don't talk about the Mountain West here, but that actually made, the way I do things, I go back reflectively, much like the selection committee does. And that win looks way better. And Santa Barbara is 6-1. And with all their talent, their only loss was by 3. Tough loss to UTEP. But I think their projection is very high. But of course, they're in that loaded Big West, who opens league play this week, Sean. So that's exciting. And then 21, a team I just got to see 3 times, is Kennesaw State. Obviously, they have the nice resume win over Rutgers,
Hmm.
but they got dominated a little bit by UC Irvine. No real shame in that. They learned a lot about themselves in that game. Turned around and beat Towson in overtime. That was good. And then
Comeback win.
yeah, good win. And then they played a really tough Kent State team. That game came down to the wire, fell short, but I really like the pieces. The 3 freshmen,
Really good.
especially Adrian Woolley is amazing, and,
Hmm.
and Miller is so good. And Cottle will get it going. He's still recovering from his orbital bone injuries. I like the upside for Kennesaw is really high.
It's very high. Yeah, I mean the fact that they're this good already with all those freshmen is pretty impressive. I mean, and Ricardo Wright, another guy who's been in college
Yeah,
basketball for a while. I remember him as a freshman at Marist. I mean,
yeah.
he's another good piece for them. Lou, another interior guy that's a freshman. They just have a lot of different pieces. They have some depth. I think they're going to be a real team in that Conference USA. But I'll get into my 25 to 21 here. I have a similar team near the end. It's Belmont. I've been very impressed by what they've done lately. Obviously, I think that win over Lipscomb kind of kick-started things for them a little bit. Jonathan Pierre has really gotten it going. The D2 transfer went to Memphis, then he transferred to Belmont. He's been great for them. At 24, I have Northern Colorado. They've been impressive to me so far, and the fact that Steve Smiley is able to consistently win while losing all the pieces that he loses year in and year out. Dalton Connect, St. Thomas, now Langston Reynolds is a star for that team. He's returning, and he's been fantastic this year. Jaron really is a really steady point guard, and they can shoot the ball like they always can. So Steve Smiley has another really good team on his hands. They look like the favorite in that conference. South Dakota State, I mean, I'll say it till the end of time. I don't know how they got Oscar Clough. But he's the main reason they're checking in at 23 here. They're the clear favorites in the Summit League at this point. Kansas City's dealing with some injuries, but they were the preseason favorites, and they've really struggled out of the gate so far. North Dakota State's going to be in that mix too. I'll talk about them a bit later, not in this, but in a different segment. But South Dakota State, I mean, Joe Saylor, Oscar Clough, some of the other freshmen they have. That's a really solid team and a team that's a lot better than I saw being. One team I have in my rankings that I know you don't is Princeton. I'm still buying into the upside for the Tigers here. I know it hasn't always looked great. They could realistically have like 5 losses right now if they didn't have some of those miraculous comeback wins. But I'm still just buying into the talent. That trio of Xavier Lee, Caden Pierce, and Dalen Davis is a kind of trio that can really carry a team. They just need the other pieces to fill in a bit. They need to be a little more effective offensively. They haven't been nearly as good from 2 point range this year as opposed to last season, which is a bit interesting. But when it comes down to it, who do I trust on the court? Someone from another team they're playing or Xavier Lee? The answer is going to be Xavier Lee. And we saw that a couple weeks ago, even though they lost to Texas State, he had like 17 points in the last 5, 6 minutes of that game. He's a different kind of talent. And I think when it comes down to it, Princeton is going to be a lot better for playing such a grueling non-conference schedule, and they're going to learn from some of these things. They're going to be the favorite in that league still in my eyes. And then Cal Poly is the final team in this segment here for me. They beat Stanford. That was a huge win over an ACC school. They almost beat Arizona State. They almost beat San Francisco. They competed with Cal. Mike DeGeorge is honestly, you could give him that Conference Coach of the Year award right now. I think it's fitting. He's done a sensational job, and they won 3 games last year, and they already have 4 or 5 wins. They have a win over a high major program. Like they are just on a different level right now, and it's hard to not see them competing for that league title, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's really insane. We'll talk about another team full of D2 transplants from the Missouri Valley, hint, hint, later on in the poll. But this is a really similar formula. You get Mike DeGeorge in from Colorado Mesa. He brings 4 players, and in that Stanford win, Owen Kuntz, who started his career at Colorado actually, and went down to D2 to develop his game, is back with a vengeance as a senior. Goes for 30 on the farm to shock Stanford 97-90. And yeah, I'm right there with you. I'll just use that to launch my 20 to 16, Sean, because I've got Cal Poly right in the middle of that at 18,
Perfect.
actually. So Cal Poly, just one of several amazing Big West stories, as this is so far the best Big West in the Ken Palm era, which started in '97. So really the best Big West since the days of New Mexico State UNLV's rivalry of the early '90s, which was at the top of the nation. And so this is just a really excited time out here in the West. But we'll go back to number 20 with Hofstra. Hofstra, a team that I thought was on the way out, Sean, but showed a
Hmm.
lot of moxie, a lot of grit, as Hofstra does, to
They
beat
do.
that good Arkansas State team and go 2-1 in the event. They took a relatively bad loss to Tarleton, who's rebuilding. And I
Hmm.
think that's just because Hofstra's so defensive minded, steel oriented, but so is Tarleton. And
Yeah.
they didn't have the offensive swagger at Hofstra to do what most teams have done to Tarleton and bury them with good O. So they lose that one late. But this is obviously a Hofstra team that's beaten Seton Hall. They've had some really great performances this year. I think they belong right there in the top 20. Akron's actually benefited, and they're my number 19 team, from just really playing a couple close games with well, they hung with St. Mary's for a while, eventually lost by double digits, but they did
Participation trophies again. Jeez.
participate. Yes, opening night game, overtime at Arc State. Then they've handled their business against everybody else, but I'm still waiting for them to get a real test. So they're benefiting from a lot of teams losing, sitting there at 19. We'll skip to 17. Cal Poly, of course, being 18. And I've got the Sanford Bulldogs. Bucky Ball hit a little bit of losing that early Cornell game. They've been coming back from the dead a little bit from our ranking standpoint. Obviously played Michigan State tough. And then they host a 3-game event. Utah Valley and North Dakota State have both proven to be pretty good mid-major teams. And although they played them at home, they handled both of them on back-to-back days. That wasn't easy. And then finished it off with West Georgia, obviously a transition team with not a lot of talent, but playing 3 games in 3 days and winning all 3 is never easy. That puts the Bulldogs 7-2, Sean. So they belong, in my opinion. And then 16 spot is a team we've talked about a lot, Middle Tennessee. They've really only had one bad night, and that was the home loss to Murray. But since that time, they go to the Myrtle Beach Invitational, get to the championship game before falling to Bradley. No shame there. Followed up this past week, just on Sunday, and win a game on the road at UAB. But UAB also struggling, but that's a really
Still a tough
impressive.
win.
It's very impressive road win. They also have a big road win by 23 points at Abilene Christian earlier in the year. So not many teams you can find that have that many 2 really quality road wins like that.
Yeah, which team would you say of that group really stands out to you the most?
Well, it's got to be Cal Poly just because they're so interesting.
Mm,
Like even though we liked the hire of Mike DeGeorge and we knew a lot of the Colorado Mesa guys were following him over, it's still a lot harder to go out on the court and prove that. You just never know how the D2 talent is going to transfer
hmm
to D1. I think that's certainly the story of those 5.
Yeah.
But I think Sanford's obviously got the highest ceiling. If they get
Mm.
it rolling with the style of play like we've seen in the last couple of years, sky's the limit. And then I think Middle Tennessee's got a tough team, but this Conference USA team's league's going to
Stacked.
stacked, and they're going to beat each other up. So
hmm
hard to know where it's going.
Yeah, that segment of teams for me, I have Kennesaw State coming in at the bottom half there. I like what they have, kind of you touched on it perfectly, so I don't have to add any more there. College of Charleston is a team you don't have in, but so their loss against Liberty, that was a tough one. Their loss against Rhode Island, maybe Rhode Island's just a good team. I didn't expect it, but they're now inside the top 90 of Ken Palm. They've been really surprising this year, and I just love what this Charleston team has. They have Darren Boyd back, that's huge. He's healthy. He looked really good a couple times so far this year already. But Ante Berzovic continues to just be an absolute monster. He might be the best mid-major player in the country. He's just such a dynamic scorer. He's a great passer. And if Lazar Djokovic gets better and becomes what I think Charleston wanted him to be, that's going to be one of the more terrifying interior duos in mid-major basketball. They just have to have those other pieces fill in and do their jobs with Daywell Tavares and CJ Fulton, all those other guys. If they're able to do what they're able to do, help fill in the gaps, then I think Charleston will be a really dangerous team and a team that I think creeps into like the top 10 of our list at some point. Then I have UCSB. This is still a team I like quite a bit. That loss against UTEP was a tough one, but UTEP got really hot from 3. I think from top to bottom, this UCSB team with their guard talent especially is really solid. They have a lot of shooting on the floor, and Jason Fontenette is a sophomore I've really enjoyed watching. UC San Diego, that's a team you've gotten an eye on a couple times in person. I think that's a good team. They have a lot of D2 talent coming up from the portal. Tate Jones is one of the more dynamic guard wings in college basketball, I would say, with everything he's able to do. He can post up, he can pass it, he can score it over smaller guys. He's just a really special talent. Tyler McGuy, Hayden Gray, Coach Olin, he does a great job at bringing in talent, and it's not always going to be that big-time D1 talent, and obviously them being a D2 school in the past, I think, helps with that a little bit, but even now, I mean, he's going with what his bread and butter is, and that's finding the diamonds in the rough, and he's continued to do that at UC San Diego, so they're going to continue to be a really fun program for us to follow, and they're definitely a team that could win the Big West, and then Kent State is the last team in there a little bit. I was watching that game against who was the second game that no, it was the Irvine game. And Jalen Solinger was definitely a bit off. I mean, it seemed like every shot he took was just nowhere close to the rim, and he's a really good player, but I think that's kind of the thing when he left. Kent State to go to Furman and then come back. I think that's the kind of thing Kent State was probably hoping got cleaned up a little bit because he was a little too shot happy last year, and he was in this game. They don't necessarily need it with the amount of talent they have, but it seemed like they were definitely pressing in that game. And I don't know what the deal was, but they just, none of their shots looked particularly close. They were missing some easy ones. Von Cameron Davis had some solid looks, but he didn't score until later in the game. He made some good passes to Hornbeak, and he missed an easy one late. So
Yeah.
I'm going to give them a bit of a mulligan there. I think Kent State's still a really good team, but that game was just weird, right?
It was a tough game for both teams. I mean, only 90 total points. That was and yeah, that was the second night. They planned to go into the tournament to rest Safford the second day, so that happened to be the same game. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have Safford at their disposal in that particular game. So it was just really frustrating. I think all night long for Kent State. The whole game started off with a little bit of a argument between the coaches. Sullinger, when he checked into the game early, used the UC Irvine sticky pad that you use to get your sneakers ready.
Mm,
And that fired up the UC Irvine coaching staff and started a little brouhaha that we ended up seeing boil over to the post game handshake. So anyway, that whole night had a lot of stories to it.
mm,
I think one thing was UC Irvine put Devin Tillis on Von Cameron Davis, and that made a huge difference in his performance. He wasn't able to do what he likes to do or get in position. Solinger, of course, they got deep into a lot of shot clock, Sean.
mm-hmm.
So of course, that's going to lead to Solinger hoisting in not optimal position. And
Yeah.
I just think it was a credit to Irvine mostly to having a great game plan, and Kent State, of course, being Safford being one of their better offensive options, not being available. That
Yeah.
hurt.
That
That
hurts.
hurt a lot too. Yep.
So you think that's more about UC Irvine and what they do defensively than anything to be concerned about Kent State moving forward?
I think mostly, yeah. I think obviously in Kent State's case, they're not the highest percentage shooting team anyway. They want to win almost similar to Irvine, where it's a little ugly. You muck it up a little bit, be the more physical team, be the
Mm-hmm.
aggressor. And I think that's why they kept getting into shouting matches with each other
Mm-hmm.
because they wanted to set the tone. Both teams wanted to set the tone. And when Kent State got into money time against both Towson in this tournament and against Kennesaw State, it paid off for them.
Yeah.
It was just that Irvine kind of out Kented Kent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Do you want to get into your next segment of teams?
Yeah, no problem. So a couple will be review at 15. I'm going with South Dakota State, so a
Mm-hmm.
little higher than Sean, but again, a lot of the same reasons. I was really impressed with the game, even though they lost the game against Boise State. Put out a
Yeah.
bunch of tweets during that game because they
Almost
were
went to
going.
OT.
Yeah, they went toe to toe and they had it for a little while, and they looked on the same level as Boise. If they can maintain that level,
Mm-hmm.
obviously they're probably out of the mix for any kind of at large, but they'll be very dangerous not only in the Summit League as the favorite probably now, but also as a potential first round upset in the NCAA's. I think Northern Colorado, you called it out great, 14th for me. They've just they beat South Dakota State handily on a neutral. So I didn't have any reason to put South Dakota State above Northern Colorado. That was hard for me. So I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving UNCO above them at 14. At 13, it's Murray State. Now Murray State had the big road win at Middle Tennessee. That's the anchor of their resume. And I think overall, just with the talent they brought back and really going to be competitive in the Valley all year. They got one neutral court game down in as part of that Jacksonville deal.
Mm-hmm.
Played a good UT Arlington team, handled their business, so that only enhances their resume further. They're coming in on the resume side of things. I think near the top 75. I would have to look that up, but they're one of the higher mid majors. So that's a good sign for not only them, but it's helping the Missouri Valley Conference. 12, I have Kent State. We just spent some good time talking about them. Best team in the MAC for me right now. I did get to see Toledo for 3 days, and I don't know what's going on with Toledo, but they got blown out by
That
Oakland.
that one
Uh,
was strange. I mean, I didn't watch that game admittedly, but I looked at the box score and I'm like, it's like 85 to 52, and I'm just like, what is happening? Because it's not like Oakland is last year's Oakland. They might be okay
no,
this year, but they're not going. They don't have Trey Townsend walking through that door anytime soon. It was just very strange. I mean, defensively, we know there's
yeah,
gonna be some issues, but their offense is falling off a cliff lately.
yeah, that's just weird. I need to reconnect with them. I left right before the championship game of their Boardwalk Battle tournament when they got destroyed by UC San Diego.
That could be
Um,
the Rocco Miller curse if you think about it. I mean, you
they need
left
to be,
them right before that
yeah.
championship game, and since then it's been a complete nightmare.
it,
Have we thought
it
about that?
really it really has. Basketball can be weird like that, but Oakland and Toledo play each other almost every year, and I know Greg Campy would have had a great game plan, and I'm going to give Oakland a lot of credit there without knowing more yet.
Mm,
On the number 11 spot, I'm going to keep High Point there. We spent a lot of time talking about High Point. Started the season interviewing Alan Huss. They somehow have managed to get to 8-1 despite a bunch of shaky games,
mm.
squeaking over Hampton, squeaking one out against a very bad Old Dominion team, even only beating American at home by 7. And but they're getting the wins, and the wins will help. And if it once they get it humming and clicking, they're we'll see. They might
Yeah.
build way back up to the top
Still
five.
not fully healthy either.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of it.
Hmm.
So a lot of great tests coming up. They go to Greensboro, which is like a local rival, and playing them on the road won't be easy. And then they host North Texas on Friday. Really important week for High Point.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, I have a team that I'm admittedly way higher on at 15 than probably just about anybody, but that's because it's a team I've really paid a lot of attention to, and that's going to be Norfolk State. Uh, I
Yeah.
like what this team has quite a bit. Robert Jones is one of the more consistent winning coaches in college basketball, but the fact that they were able to add Brian Moore Jr., a guy that I've been a huge fan of for 3, 4 years at this point, dating back to his JUCO days, he's just a big time athlete, and he's not afraid to drive and go against bigger guys. He's like 6'1", 180, but he plays a lot bigger. He's really athletic, and he made this really nice, they tweeted out too, this really nice step back jumper, which really isn't something that he's done a ton. He's not really been a shooter, but he's shooting almost 90% from the foul line. He's shooting really in a really efficient percentage from downtown this year. So I think he's really upped his game. He's averaging over 20 points per game so far this year. They had a big win over James Madison. They've just continued to win. They played Grand Canyon relatively tough in that second half of that game. Christian Ings is another big player for them. He's been quite good. And Jalen
Yeah.
Myers, another guy who transferred from UT Martin. He was another JUCO guy. So Rob Jones is getting these guys like Moore, like Myers, that are on their second go arounds after coming from the JUCO level. Couldn't get him the first time because they went higher, obviously, and he's able to get them on the downswing a bit. And then Sincere McCormick, he's been really good so far this year. I really like what this team has. They're going to be a really fun team to watch moving forward. I know I have them higher than most people, but this might be his best team. And Samford's the next team coming up for me. Every time I look at a Sanford game, they're down 15 in the second half, and they're able to find a way to win every single game. It's really crazy, but that's kind of buckyball for you. They probably don't want to be burying themselves that deep of a hole every single game, but at the same time, uh, the fact that they're able to come back speaks to that they know they have a style. They're not going to panic, and I think that that's really special in a lot of ways because they had a stretch against North Dakota State where they were down a bunch and came back. Same the next day against Utah Valley a couple weeks ago, and they were able to do the same thing. And those are two really solid teams. But Rylan Jones is a really reliable point guard for them, and the duo of Colin Holloway and Jaden Brownell is going to be a really big difference for them moving forward. I still think they're the favorites in the SoCon, even though I have them ranked behind another SoCon team. I think when it comes down to it, if you're asking me today to pick who's going to win that conference, I would say Samford. Next up for me is Northeastern. They've been one of the more surprising teams
Wow.
at the mid-major level for me. And again, another team I'm kind of high on, but I like what this team has quite a bit. You have Harold Woods, who's really enjoyed a breakout season. You have Rashad King, same deal for him. Bill Cohen, I think, is one of the more underrated mid-major coaches around. And it's been a really rough past 3 seasons. They've been hit by injuries. They've been hit by the portal quite a bit. But he finally got some guys that were able to return for multiple seasons, and he's always done a really good job at those in-house guys really improving. So I'm kind of buying the upside here a little bit of Harold Woods, Rashad King, and some of those other pieces. And I'm going to rank Northeastern a little bit highly here. Then I'm going to go with Furman, who I have a couple spots ahead of Samford, but they've been impressive so far this year. They played against Kansas. That game obviously not super close, but they're a lot better defensively than they have been in past years. They have Cooper Bowser down low, who's a really solid defender. They have Garrett Heen, who's been around forever. PJ Smith has really stepped up with JP Pegues now at Auburn. So Bob Ritchie, there wasn't a lot of expectations for Furman this year, but maybe that was a good thing because there was expectations last year. They didn't live up to them. They were able to fall off the radar a little bit. And now they're back to where they should be contending for a SoCon title. And then the final team in that mix for me is Middle Tennessee, a team that we both liked in the preseason, and they're really starting to show their upside here. And you talked about them quite a bit, so I like what I've seen from them.
Nice. No, good calls on those. I agree. Sanford probably will be the favorite in the regular season chase,
Mm,
especially just playing that style. And they're really difficult to beat in Birmingham, as they proved in their host event where they went 3-0. And that's why a lot of teams don't want to go down there and play them.
no.
So, yeah. So, and we'll get to the top 10, shall we, Sean?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I still have Grand Canyon at number 10, and they are starting to show some good signs lately. They got the win over Stanford in Palm Desert. That was a really good sign, I thought, because it was more of a even distribution of the way they distributed shots and ran offense. Tyon Grant Foster only shot 10 shots. We had five guys in double figures, and one of
Mm,
them, and none of them were Grant Foster. So I think that's really imperative for the Lopes to win a lot of games like we thought they would, get everybody involved, different night, different hero, that
mm.
mentality. And then also, before they got out there, they played that Norfolk team that you spoke highly
Love
about,
that team.
beat them by 18. So, like, that's kind of where Grand Canyon needs to be at this stage of the season. They'll get Hawaii on Tuesday night at home. I'm sure they'll be okay there. They're
Yeah.
really kind of looking forward to that week, a week from now, when they'll get Georgia and Atlanta, and then 2 nights later play at La Tech. That will tell us a lot about where the Lopes are heading. But I like the most latest performances from GCU. At number 9, another Big West team, UC San Diego, did a great job talking about them. The Boardwalk Battle champions. They took it easy last week, only played a non-D1 game. So they're sitting pretty at number 9. At number 8, Louisiana Tech, who was previously in my top 3,
I'm
got
so hurt by that loss. Let me tell you, man.
and I mean, because of my foundation in bracketology and understanding that the whole body of work, I can't overreact to the home loss to Southern 73-70. That's a very athletic, hungry Southern team that plays nothing but road games for 2 months,
But
and
it's a game you got to win. Like
it's a game you got to win. But
Southern
they're
deserves
coming.
credit, but you got to win.
It when you see this a lot too, Sean. We saw Boston College lose to Dartmouth
Mm-hmm.
right after they got back from their MTE in the Caribbean. Well,
Mm-hmm.
same thing happened with La Tech. They go down and win the Gulf Coast Showcase Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, beating Southern Illinois in overtime, Richmond on Tuesday, EKU on Wednesday. Then they only got Thursday and Friday to recover. Southern comes in. So again, I just don't think La Tech was really smart to schedule this game that close to the 3, because
Yeah.
you have a lot of you probably need a week off like what UC San Diego did. So that was a risky move, and Southern made them pay. Took a bus from Baton Rouge to Ruston and made the magic happen. So kudos
Okay,
to
hold on. I'm gonna interrupt real fast before you finish your ranking. Since you're the scheduling guy, why? I mean, we've seen it twice in the last week.
yeah.
Why are teams scheduling games by games, especially against teams who are going to come in energized, ones that aren't coming off a long road trip on an MTE? Why are teams scheduling games so close together to that?
Glad you asked. So in BC's case, that was a certain mistake, and the way that happened was they were supposed to play in a tournament called the Hall of Fame Tip-Off
Hmm.
in the Mohegan Sun. They had already scheduled the Dartmouth game, and then they wanted to. Then they last minute preferred to go down to the Caribbean event instead, so they couldn't get out of the Dartmouth date, so they
Mm,
were stuck just from doing it in reverse. Whereas La Tech and several schools in this part of the country, I think this is why it's a great question. They have really, really difficult challenges in getting anybody in D1 to come to those remote locations for a
yeah.
home game. So if Southern's willing to come and you're La Tech, typically the mentality is we'll take them whenever we can get them, because we just don't have enough D1 teams that will come here. And that was actually their first Division 1 home game. Their other home games were 2 non D1 teams. So,
Hmm.
and you look at the rest of their schedule, they only got Grand Canyon because it's the WAC CUSA Challenge,
Hmm.
and then they have Georgia Southern because they did a home and away with them. So they only have 3 D1 home games total. So again, it's all case by case. Like, obviously, if you're Grand Canyon, you have no excuse to do that because your scheduling and your money is like a high major. But
Yeah.
if you're La Tech, that's why Sanford hosts their own event. It's a guarantee to get 3 home games.
So why
So
don't more teams do that? I mean, that seems like a solution.
we run out of teams at a certain point.
Okay.
so
Easier
so
said than
not
done.
everybody can pull it off. There's a number of teams that La Tech's actually one that tried to do it for a while this year, and I think they'll try again next year. But eventually, they have to rip the Band-Aid off and go
Mm,
somewhere else, and that's why they ended up in the Gulf Coast. But terrific question, Sean. I'm
yeah,
glad you asked because
yeah.
it's not a one size fits all answer. Everybody's got their unique challenges and different budgets, and that impacts everything. At 7, Furman, like you said, they've really impressed and surprised. They played in a really interesting event where they got to play at Kansas and learn some stuff about themselves. Obviously, not super competitive, but a great opportunity.
Mm,
And when they went to Vegas, they beat a really good Seattle University team. So that Furman's continuing to uphold that early season road win at Belmont, and I've got them 7. 6, Columbia 8-0. We talked to Jim Engles on the show, or we will hear in a moment. We'll talk a lot of Columbia soon, but just totally earned that at number 6, just rolling with that Villanova early upset win and unblemished since then.
mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, in my 10 to 6 spots, I have Louisiana Tech at 10, which sucks. I don't want to put them there, but I mean, that loss, they were 15.5 point favorites. Like, they were widely expected to destroy Southern in this game. And it's one of those spots where it's a bit of a letdown spot in a couple of different aspects because you are coming back from an MTE in one. Secondly, there. I'm not saying they did this, but I mean, there's some probably mentality where you're probably like, okay, we should beat Southern. We have Memphis coming up, and that can kind of springboard us into getting a at-large bid. And at the same time, Memphis coming back from Maui, they can kind of have that same thing. They're like, hey, we should beat Louisiana Tech. We're coming back from Maui. They had a great week in Maui. They're now 16th nationally. So it's a bit of a letdown spot in the same token for Memphis. But Louisiana Tech, that's the kind of loss. It's going to be a quadrant 4 loss. It's a kind of loss that probably eliminates them or gets close to eliminating them from an at-large bid, I would guess, because you just can't take that many quad 4 losses. And with the way that Conference USA is, there's a lot of really good teams. They're going to take some losses in conference play because that league is just stacked from top to bottom. But at 9, I have Murray State. I just keep coming away really impressed by this Murray State team. We talk about Drake, we talk about Bradley, but Murray State belongs in that same conversation. I think Steve Prohm did a great job in the portal adding Terrence Harcum. A guy that's a proven winner from App State, good 3-and-D player. Kyron Lindsey has been really good so far this year, good reclamation project from Texas Tech and Georgia. He's been fantastic. Jacoby Wood, Nick Ellington, all these different pieces. They don't really have a star, but they have all these pieces that fit together really well, and Murray State looks like a legit team. We saw them beat Middle Tennessee. I'm all in on the Racers. High Point I have coming in at number 8. Again, I'm still buying the talent here. I think they're a very talented team. Bobby Pettiford's back. We'll see what kind of role he ultimately settles into, but the duo that will carry this team is Keza Jiffa and Demorian Williams. But I think the thing that can help them quite a bit is their offense hasn't been as explosive as I expected it to be. But I think adding Terry Anderson back when he gets healthy is going to be a real difference maker for them on the defensive end. He's something besides Kamani Hamilton they just don't really have on that end. And I think their defense will help lead to some more good looks on the offensive end. After High Point, I have Liberty coming in there. Liberty's been really impressive top to bottom so far this year. I mean, they played McNeese State. That was a really good win for them. They beat Kansas State. This Liberty team is legit. Richie McKay is one of the best coaches in the country, regardless of level. And what I love about this team is everybody on the floor can pass. They're going to keep playing their style. And there has to be nothing more gutting than when you're facing this team and they're able to just dish the ball inside and kick it out with 2 seconds on the shot clock and hit a three right in your face. There can't be anything more disappointing than that. And Liberty's just been awesome this year. I really love what this team has. Owen Aquino, Zach Cleveland, they're going to be a real force to be reckoned with. And this one was a bit tough for me because I'm a guy that's going to buy in on the upside. I know this will probably age poorly, but I'm going to go with McNeese State one spot ahead of Liberty. Probably a little bit controversial, but I see the spot for McNeese State where they're coming up against Santa Clara, and that's a big home game for them. The fact that they have Santa Clara at home is a big one in general, but you look at some of these losses for McNeese State. They lost to Liberty by 4. They lost to South Dakota State. That was a bit of a tough one to start the year, and they competed really hard with Alabama, and obviously we're a big participation trophy podcast, so Alabama only losing to them by 8 is pretty good. They beat a solid Longwood team. They beat a really solid Illinois State team. They beat North Texas. I'm still banking on the upside of this team. Sincere Parker seems like he's really starting to get it going, 16 points per game. I still think they're trying to figure out some of their rotation stuff. Alan Breed still is hurt, but they only have two players averaging more than 9 points per game. And that's Javon Garcia and Sincere Parker. I would like to see the minutes be a little more solidified, figure out who's playing what kind of minute, who has what kind of role. And once that starts to happen, and players start to settle into what they're supposed to do, I think this McNeese State team could really take off.
No doubt, no doubt. And that's a great segue, Sean, because guess who I have at number 5?
McNeese State.
That's right, McNeese.
Perfect.
For all the reasons you described, and yeah, they lost a heartbreaker there to Liberty in the championship game, but I think the pieces are there. Santa Clara is also coming off of a MTE championship loss to Washington, tough
Uh,
travel. McNeese has really got to take advantage of that opportunity. But yeah, Santa Clara's coming off a loss, so they're going to look to make some adjustments. Should be a really interesting matchup. And the cool thing is it's a home and home, so we'll get
uh,
McNeese out here at Santa Clara next
awesome.
year.
You'll be there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see. You got to see who's on whose team. Those teams could look a lot different. The coaches could look different.
Hmm.
So, but that's still exciting. Great for the McNeese program, no doubt. And then at the 4 spot, Bradley. Bradley's been a model of consistency. They're the Myrtle Beach Invitational champions of a week ago. They continue to play at a high level. Their only loss was at Wazoo, first week of the year. Tough place to go. Got a little surprised by Wazoo. But they've bounced back nicely. Not much happened last week, so they're settling in comfortably at the 4 spot. 3, I am actually putting Liberty at the 3 spot, Sean, and obviously, with they do have the one loss, which was a neutral court OT loss, Florida Atlantic, right here on the field of 68. But so impressive that they bounced back and blew out Charleston. Of course,
Hmm.
then their path in the Paradise Jam, beating McNeese in the finals, but also beating a high major in Kansas State in the semis. Their resume is shining right now. And one of the things I talked to Richie McKay about during the offseason, Sean, was the fact that, they needed to get a little bit more athletic. And he went and found a guy, Javon Mogmer from non-Division One
Hmm.
play, to come in, and he's given them some great minutes. And same with Isaiah Innen, who was
Yeah.
off of a sophomore year from the Big Ten's Minnesota program. And I actually agreed with him quite a bit. I covered Liberty last year at the Myrtle Beach when they looked awesome and started the year undefeated, and then all of a sudden they hit a wall and they couldn't figure out how to snap out of it.
Yeah.
They really needed an uptick on the athleticism. I think with those two pieces, plus we already know Cleveland's a beast.
And Owen Aquino.
And Owen Aquino's a beast. So yeah, so this is a really interesting, nice mix roster. Obviously, letting Colin Porter, steer the ship, and Caden Matheny's deadly on certain nights. So I like where they're going. A little bit better than I thought they'd be at this point.
Hmm.
Very impressive. Number 2 is UC Irvine. Obviously, just spent a lot of time with them, and not only did they win the tournament in Alberta last week, but they also won a bit by a lot of points at Northern Iowa. They've won at Weber State. They've won at LMU. And 6 of their next 7 games will be on the road again. So these guys are going anywhere, playing anyone,
Hmm.
and super deep, super talented, super together.
Hmm.
Devin Tillis wins the MVP of the event. Well deserved. Played great defensively on top of his offensive numbers. Bent Loishton in the middle is a super polished player, really heads up defender as well. And I think one of the only 7-footers in the Big West, which will give them a big advantage in such a competitive league.
Hmm.
There's a lot to like. Hopefully Richfield can recover and get back by next season. I'm assuming he's out for the year. That was a really ugly injury.
Yeah.
But they were already going 11 deep. They have plenty of depth. They're totally okay there. And then at the number 1 spot, it's still Drake. I know Drake had 1 game at home last week. They handled their business. Charleston Classic champs. Resume speaks for itself. A couple high major wins out there. And until further notice, it's Drake at the top for me.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of same teams in that range. At 5 for me, I'm going Grand Canyon. Actually, you had them a little bit lower than I did, but Here's my thought process here. So when they lost to Arizona State, I believe GCU was favored in that game at the time. I don't think we knew that Arizona State was going to be what they are. And Arizona State is a really good team, as we've now found out. They have wins over Grand Canyon. They have a win over New Mexico. They have a win over St. Mary's. This is just a good team. And at the time, I think that was more of a, hey, this is a really disappointing loss for Grand Canyon than oh, Arizona State's actually just good. So I think when you look at it from that scope, you're like, okay, they lost by 11. The game was a lot closer than that. It was Ty and Grant Foster's first game back. You can give them a bit of some grace there. Then the next game, they just looked shaken up a little bit for some reason against UC Davis, and UC Davis is a good team. Ty Johnson's a monster, but they fought back. A lot of this stuff in that game was a lot of self-inflicted mistakes, and it seems like their last two games they've really corrected some of that as they beat Norfolk State by 18, they beat Stanford by 7. Ty and Grant Foster picked up more of a facilitating role against Stanford, but I think that speaks to his maturity a little bit because some of those guys who are supposed to be the star of the team, and he is the star of the team, would see, hey, the shots aren't going down. I'm going to just take 20 more of them because, shooter's mentality and all that. But him and Ray Harrison, when it combined 6 for 20, they were still able to win that game by 7. So when you think about, okay, those guys didn't perform well in theory, what happens when they do? And when that happens, you have those two, you have the interior presence from Jacoby Coles. The upside is immense. I mean, this team is going to be really good, and I would not want to face this Grand Canyon team moving forward. I feel like this is the lowest they'll be for the remainder of the year. I have Columbia at 4. We'll get to Jim Engles here in a little bit, but that team's been awesome. I mean, Kenny Noland has been a great contributor next to Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa, and maybe some people thought that win over Villanova was a fluke, but so far they're 8-0, and there's no signs of letting up. Bradley, one of the more consistent programs in college basketball at the mid-major level. Brian Wardle is just a great coach. It's a
No
consistent
doubt.
effort from everybody on the floor. That's a good team over there. UC Irvine at 2, like you said, you touched on them really well, and Drake at 1. Drake, I mean, that Kansas State game they play in a couple weeks, or is it this week or next week? Next week?
No, it's December 17th. I'm
Oh,
planning on making it out
so
there.
neither of the weeks that I just mentioned. Okay,
That's
but you'll
okay.
be there. You'll be there?
I'm planning to be there. Yeah, Kansas City, downtown
Okay.
arena. Be a big moment. A lot of locals should be sold out, I think.
So they might be ranked by then, but if they're not, they will be ranked after that game if they win. That's going to be a huge game for them. But the thing I know for certain is that Bennett Sturts, Ben McCollum, Mitch Muscari, and Daniel Abreu will not be shaken up by that moment. Those guys have won national championships. This might be a bit of a bigger scale game in theory, more eyes on it, but I don't think those guys are really scared of the moment. Those guys are tough. And Bennett Sturts is maybe my favorite player in the country because that dude's just such a good passer. He's a great scorer, and he just makes everything happen for that team. I love this Drake team, and I didn't foresee them ever being number one in my poll or your poll this year. But I mean, Ben McCollum just done an outstanding job, and they've been the real surprise of college basketball so far to me.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good opportunity too. Like they can't overlook, and nor will they, because it's a Ben McCollum coach team. They won't be overlooking anybody, I don't think. But we have the Missouri Valley starting conference play. So Drake's got one game at Valparaiso Thursday.
Mm.
Valparaiso's 4-3. They got handled pretty easily by DePaul last week. But anytime it's your league opener, everybody, it's almost like I hate these analogies, but it's good for the audience where you always hear that example first round NCAA tournament game. You're gonna have these periods where they're gonna fill each other out for a while.
Yeah.
Valparaiso is gonna have that. We have nothing to lose. The home game. Try to get a lot of people into the crowd Thursday night. Could be an interesting test for Drake.
The fans should really pack that arena. I mean, I don't know what the fans recently have been like at Valpo, but I know they've had some solid
Awesome.
fan bases over the years. So I mean, if you're a Valpo fan and you're not at that game or you're a Valpo student, you need to pack that arena because this is going to be quite the opportunity for an early season win and a good time for you to get some national recognition. I mean, beating Drake will be a big spot for that.
No doubt. And I know we're running low on time here today, but just a few games to watch this week, Sean,
Hmm.
as we look forward to another great week of college hoops and a lot of intense battles across the landscape. I had down Louisiana Tech, a team we talked about. They're trying to lick their wounds now after that unfortunate Southern loss. They get a chance to erase all that and play their biggest road game at Memphis, just all upside. But they've got the athletes to hang. Should be really interesting. I think
Hmm.
you'll get a good effort out of La Tech
They
there.
have the size too. That's the thing. They have the size. 6'4", 6'4" with Caden Cooper and Amari Abram. They have Bacho down low. Sean Newman as the point guard. They have the size to compete. They're not going to be some mid-major team that walks in and just gets out-toughed, out-sized, out-talented. That's not what that team is.
No, not at all, not at all. And then a local matchup between two teams that we both have
Hmm.
in our polls. With I think we both have one in our polls, but Middle Tennessee
Yep.
going to Belmont, right across the freeway there, and I think you're going to see Belmont. They have a top 50 effective field goal percentage offense. What will Middle Tennessee do to counter that? Middle Tennessee is a top 50 defending the 3-point line defense. A lot of chess probably here between McDevitt and Coach Alexander. Should be a great one on Saturday. If you're in the Nashville area, get to that game. And then the last one coming up on Thursday, Big West action is starting. I can't believe it's already here. It's a 1 week mini preview. I don't think we get to see Big West games again until after close to New Year's. But we have a real treat coming up in the Thunderdome with UC Santa Barbara hosting that UC San Diego team.
That's a
Kind of
good. That's a good game.
kind of tells you why UC San Diego didn't play any D1 games last week. They want to
They
get
got to
all
prepare. Yeah.
they got to get all the way ready for these Gauchos. Oh, that's going to be such an awesome game. So make sure to tune into that Thursday night.
Yeah, my three before we wrap it up and talk to Columbia head coach Jim Engles. The first one for me is this story has really just been intriguing to me for a while. Is High Point hosting North Texas? That's a buy game. High Point buying a ACC school, paying them to go play at their arena. A Big South team just goes to show how deep the pockets are at High Point. But this is another big opportunity for them. They beat UAB at home already this year. That was a home and home. Now they're hosting a bye game against North Texas, and North Texas is a really good team. Ross Hodge, a great
Yeah.
coach. Obviously, we won't get to talk about them a lot here, but Atten Wright, a guy formerly at Drake, formerly at CSUN, Latrell Jostle, Jasper Floyd, a lot of guys that were former guys that we got to talk about a lot throughout the years, now playing for North Texas in the AAC. If there's a second best team in that league, there might not be. It might just be Memphis and then a bunch of other teams, but North Texas is probably the second best. And then High Point will get a good chance to play a team with a much different style. High Point wants to play up tempo. North Texas wants to slow it down. I think High Point has a bit of an edge there at home. Northern Colorado against North Dakota State. North Dakota State's a team that will be in this poll at some point. I'm telling you that much. I love that interior duo of Jackson Money and non-D1 transfer Noah Federson. That's going to be an interesting team to see against Northern Colorado, who doesn't really have as much size. They have Brock Wisney and Isaiah Hawthorne down low, but Federson and Money are both like 6'11", 7 foot. So I think that's advantage North Dakota State in that one. Plus NDSU has some good guards. And then Princeton against Furman. I mean, earlier this year, that might have looked like a Princeton just absolute go in and blow them out, but the size that Furman has is going to be really imposing in this matchup, and they're going to try to take Xavier Lee out of what he does well, which is drive to the basket, create shots. They're going to try to make him more of a passer probably and make others beat them. And with how Furman's defense has been really solid this year, I think that game's going to be really tough for Princeton. But they've had some time to reflect on it after their MTE. We'll see how Princeton looks bouncing back in that one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Princeton's got a lot in them, but they've been trying to make up for some personnel issues themselves.
Mhm.
I think that's been the theme. We've seen like High Point, Grand Canyon, and Princeton have to deal with personnel issues. Those were three of our top teams at the start of the year, and
Mhm.
that's created a big window for a bunch of these other teams like Drake and Irvine and Liberty to emerge. That's why we love it, Sean.
Absolutely. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. And I would say one of the most surprising things that has happened so far this year is Columbia being 8-0. Are they the best team in the Ivy League? They might very well be. We'll talk to head coach Jim Engles right now about it. That's it for this portion of the show with Rocco Miller and myself. Thanks for watching. And we're going to talk to Jim Engles for the remainder of the show. All right, here with Columbia head coach Jim Engles, who's off to a great start so far. It's not just the win over Villanova a couple weeks ago, but they are 7-0 right now. One of the better starts in program history. So, coach, how you doing?
Sean, it's 8-0. Don't
Oh, it's
don't
eight
be
and 0 now. Okay,
chip. Yeah, we need don't every win's important now, dude. Come on, let's go.
great
Everything's
start.
great. Yeah, we're doing well. Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on and really thankful and guys have been awesome. Season's gone about as well as you could script it. So everything's been going great with practice. We've guys have been healthy and we're looking forward to hopefully we can keep it going.
Yeah, Jim, thanks again for coming on. I'm curious about what that early win at Villanova did for your program and the locker room's confidence level. Because time. I think you had one close call with Lehigh, but mainly been an enforcer in each of your games since. And what did that win do for you guys?
It was interesting. We started off at Loyola. So we went to Loyola, and then we had Villanova a couple of days later. So we started at Loyola. I mean, the start of the season, and you're really not sure what to expect. Obviously everybody's thinking about winning a championship, and everything's been going great, and practice has been great. And we went into that Loyola game, and we were down a substantial amount of points in the last 10 minutes of the game, and really could have went the other way. And we were thankfully, after a couple of years, we've had a chance to put these guys in some experiences where they've been able to experience being down, and they were able to come back, and we won the game. And the next day we were in the hotel, and we went through the film, and we really talked about stuff that we needed to do and needed to improve upon. I thought Loyola did a great job, and really played very well. And so we were able to sort of learn from that experience, and we went into the Villanova game, and our guys are experienced now. They sort of understand what this is all about, and I thought we played really well. It was obviously a great win for the program and a great win for the school. But our guys have been through it, and I think one of the advantages we've had is we've had a lot of continuity. A lot of these programs now don't have that continuity, especially at the beginning of the year. And we've been through it a couple of years now, and I thought that was a big advantage for us, honestly. And it's been the big advantage for these first 8 games.
Yeah, you talk about the continuity, and one of your best players over the last couple of years has been Geronimo Rubio De La Rosa, but it seems like he's really made a huge leap this season. Speak a little bit about the work that he's put in the last couple of years and what it means to have that guy stick around the program, because nowadays it's not just Ivy League schools are losing players now too. I mean, we saw it last offseason, guys who don't even have their Ivy League degrees leaving. So I mean, in theory, he could have left.
Yeah, I mean, when he stepped on, the background with him is we brought him in during the pandemic, so we never saw him play in person. We only were
Oh,
able to watch certain. There were only certain states that were playing high school basketball at the time, so Texas happened to be one of them. And one of my staff members brought him and showed him to me, and so just a little bit through my staff's hard work and just sort of mining some guys and finding some guys, we were able to watch him on film, and we took him really sight unseen. We watched him on film, but we never saw him play in person. He could have we were hoping we were getting this 6'3" guard. He could have shut up at 6'1" and 6 foot. Could have been a completely different guy. We could have had the wrong film. So we got really lucky. And the other great part of this story is getting a little bit lucky is, watching a film, and there's a 6'10" kid on the film. And I go to my assistant, like, who's the 6'10" kid? And does he have grades? And he happens to be our starting center right now. So, a lot of this is, you do a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of things that you try to plan out and process, but a lot of it sometimes is just being in the right place at the right time. So Geronimo stepped on our campus, was literally our best player. We lost basically our whole team due to the pandemic. The Ivy League has strict rules in regards to graduation. So we had 9 new guys his freshman year, and he was our best player from the jump. He was getting acclimated to the environment, the academic environment at Columbia. Obviously there's a lot of challenges, not only to being a student athlete at Columbia in regards to basketball. It's just being able to compete in the classroom. And um, he just can't. His consistency has really been sort of the standard bearer for our program over his 4 years. And with him being consistent and continually improving, the other guys have improved with him. And now, honestly, I really believe he's having the year he's having it because of these other guys have improved.
yeah, Coach Ingles, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you look at the numbers in a little bit more of a breakdown fashion, and Geronimo Rubio De La Rosa himself is a top 15 most efficient player in all of America, all college basketball, top 15 in shot selection, a lot of these really key areas that contribute to winning games. And then you look at the total team numbers, and right now, I think you guys are 26th in effective field goal percentage. But the thing that stood out even more to me was you're a top 50 team of both inside the arc and outside the arc. So, maybe just talk a little bit about if a lot of that is the attention that he draws, frees other guys up. Is it just overall good shot selection? And maybe how much of that is you have deeper talent than just De La Rosa?
Yeah, we definitely have deeper talent than just Geronimo. And he's really had to, again, carry sort of the standard for what we've had. A lot of these guys, but I think a lot of you talk about 2 point percentage. A lot of that 2 point percentage now is just due to physicality. We've
Yeah.
had, this junior class we've had, a lot of these kids came and started as freshmen, and
Hmm.
it was not an easy adjustment. We had some really good, highly recruited guys who had other options that were, decent from the outside places to go, like really good places to go. And these guys thought they were coming in and everything would be easy. And then they realized that they're going against, especially with the pandemic, we're going against guys, 10 new guys on each roster. Some of these guys are 24 years old. And it was a huge adjustment. So we finally have been able to grow into the actual process and go through the normal process of what it is to become a better basketball player. These guys have physically gotten better, they're mentally gotten better. And I think the 2 point percentage is improved because these guys understand the physicality of the game now, whereas we tried to teach them it and they didn't see it.
So pivoting a little bit here, this is something that's always been interesting to me, and I want to get your insight on it a little bit as an Ivy League head coach. Obviously, your guys' conference tournament is really unique. You only get the top four teams in the conference to play in that postseason, so it's the semifinals from the jump. But this year especially, every single team in the league could compete to get into that Ivy League tournament. So is that tough for you? Do you wish every team got in? Do you wish it was like a normal conference tournament, or how do you feel about there being four teams in the Ivy League tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I understand how the whole process works. I understand the difference with the Ivy League, but I do think these guys are basketball players. They're great students. They're good basketball players. I would love to see an 18 conference tournament. I know people might not agree with that from the league, but I I do think that that would be fair. These kids put
Mhm.
in just as much hard work as the guys from Kansas
Yeah.
and Villanova and Creighton and all these different schools, and they all want to they all want to play professionally at some point. So I would love to see an 18 tournament. Again, I understand the differences with the Ivy League. So, getting into that 14 tournament is a big deal for our conference. And, that's obviously one of the goals that we have for this year. So we'd love to get into the conference tournament. That would be a huge part of our success.
There's more stakes in the Ivy League regular season than any other league because of it. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, again, the Ivy League, having a conference tournament is a huge deal
Yeah.
now.
Hmm.
When I was an assistant, if you lost your if you lost your first two games, you're basically just trying to
Out.
motivate the guys and run through the season. You're trying
Hmm.
to keep the guys motivated and focused on just finishing it out. Now you could lose, you could be 6-8 and still get in the conference tournament.
Hmm.
So it does make the league games, at the end of the year, the league games are really, really high level, and it's almost like a conference tournament all season, which
Yeah.
is really crazy. But these guys, every game is so important, and one game could be the difference between third and fourth place or fourth and fifth place.
No doubt. Yeah. And I think it adds excitement and interest and intrigue to the league. But I think also, with the COVID year and the way that the transfer portal has taken over the sport, the Ivy League has benefited from that a little bit, right? Where you probably have the most continuity per league than any other league. I don't know if that's something that you guys have really like benefited from. From what I can tell, you have. But what are your overall thoughts on how the Ivy League as a whole can capitalize on this era?
Yeah, I mean that's the way the league has been built. That's the tradition of the league, and obviously, from a student athlete perspective, that's really what college sports is supposed to be about. So, the
Right.
model and the consistency and the core values of what our league has been built on is really, it's basically what this is supposed to be. I really believe that. So, we understand that some of the advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages, we can recruit some really, really good players because of the Ivy League degree and the end game with what the degree has, and um, so there's advantages there. And then, but some of the disadvantages are that, they all the things that these guys have to do. It's you're a real student here, and
Yeah.
you gotta be in class every day. There's no online
Hmm.
classes. It's a very demanding routine, and the rigor is really strong. So, there's positives and negatives that go with it, and hopefully the Ivy League can continue to hold that standard there.
Yeah, Jim, I've spent a lot of time in New York City, and I got to see you guys play last year, and it's been a great story for what Sean and I cover
Mm.
for a lot of the year, the mid major scene, and out there in New York City, I think they're very familiar with. I mean, at least to a certain extent, with Columbia's history of not making the NCAA since 1968. But this Ivy Madness idea started in 2017, and Columbia, Dartmouth are two schools. They're the two schools that haven't qualified yet. Is there, because you're 8-0 now, and because of that background, are you starting to sense some buzz? Are there a few more people attending the home games? I know you had a couple home games recently.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I mean, the buzz has been great. It's so fun to see the guys, just just the campus feel, and obviously our football team just won an Ivy League
Mm-hmm.
championship for the first time since the '60s, and our women's basketball team has won the Ivy League the last 2 years and has been in the NCAA tournament. So, there's a lot of feel good stories going around with our athletic department, and I think it's great that our guys have been able to experience some of this stuff. Being a college athlete, being a basketball player, you grew up and that's your identity when you're a young kid, and you want to be involved and you want to be sort of given that opportunity to feel a little bit special. And it's been fun to see those guys get that experience now. Geronimo and Robbie Stanker were on Fox Sports last night, and
Yeah.
we've had some different national media people reach out. You guys are reaching out. You guys wouldn't be reaching out to us if we were 2-6, right?
No,
So,
we wouldn't
um,
be.
yeah,
I,
even though I'm a
we'd be talking offline probably.
Yeah,
exactly.
you'd be talking
You
about
guys
next
wouldn't
year's
even be
schedule.
calling me. You wouldn't even
Yeah,
be texting me. Come on.
yeah.
But it's great for our guys. It's one of the guys commented the other day. Yeah, I walk in and the security guys are always asking about the season, and they go into the cafeteria and everybody's really happy with all the work that's been put into this. So there's a lot for these guys to take advantage of now, and the big thing now is just to maintain what we're doing and obviously continue to improve and keep going.
All right, so final question for me before Rocco gets into his last question here. So the win over Villanova, obviously referenced it earlier, but where would you say that moment ranks among all the moments that you've had in your head coaching career? Is that number one, or is there something else topping that one?
Yeah, my daughter, so this backstory here with this is a couple of years ago, my daughter went to Wake Forest. She
Mm,
graduated from Wake Forest. So Danny Manning was the coach at the time, and I called Danny and I tried to get us on the schedule, and we went through this whole negotiation process, and we got there, and we went down there. We wound up losing in overtime, and my daughter was a freshman. So when I scheduled that game, my youngest daughter was like, "Well, you better make sure that where I get a chance to you guys play against my school." So she went to Villanova. So I've been trying to get Villanova on the schedule, and obviously with a bunch of the different stuff that's gone on with the pandemic, and Jay left and all that kind of stuff. So we finally got him on the schedule, and she sat behind the bench and she had a blast and she loved it. And so I've been able to do that. We were able to go down there and play, and it was an unbelievable experience. We had a lot
mm.
of fun just as a family. Obviously the fact that we won made it even more special, um, and it was obviously a big deal for us and big deal for me, big deal for my program, and we were able to enjoy it and get a lot out of it.
Hey, Coach, last question for you, and thanks for all your time. This has been awesome. You got Albany coming up on the road on Wednesday night, and last year you took a tight home loss against the Great Danes. It's also a Great Dane program that doesn't get many D1 home games, so they're probably going to be really excited to bring in an 8-0 team. How are you guys preparing for it, and are you using that loss from last year as motivation?
Honestly, not last year. We've sort of that it feels like forever ago.
Yeah.
Dwayne's done a great job there. They have a really good team.
Hmm.
Watching them on film, I've been to Albany many times. I've been a coach for a long time. Playing at Albany, they have a great fan base. That Albany Siena game is a huge deal.
Mhm.
So just going up when I was at Ryder, we used to go up and play in Siena and play in the Pepsi Arena. I don't know what they call it now, but so the fan base up in Albany is basketball is a big deal up there. So I'm sure there'll be a really good crowd. They have a good team. It'll be a good game. They play really hard. So it'll be a big challenge for us. So we're just really, but again, honestly, I don't want to sound cliche, but we just really are trying to focus on what we can accomplish. And, I'm hoping that we can sort of match playing in a hostile environment like that and match their physicality and their toughness. I'm just hoping that we can continue to play the way we've been playing, and I think it'll be a really good game. It should be a fun college basketball game.
Yeah, that game's on Wednesday. That should be pretty exciting, and we'll let you go and have some time to prepare before that game, Coach. So thanks again to Columbia head coach Jim Engles of the 8-0 Columbia Lions. I'm not shortchanging this time.